You're not stuck because something is wrong with you. You're stuck because your attention has been trained to move in the same patterns every single day, and then you wonder why nothing in your life seems to change. Right now, as you read this, there's a silent process running inside you. It's not just a thought or a belief, it's a loop. This loop decides what you notice, what you ignore, what you expect, and even what you unknowingly recreate in your life. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people don't actually live in reality. They live inside their own perception pattern, and reality simply reflects it back. That's why someone can work on themselves for years and still face the same types of situations, the same emotional triggers, the same kind of people, and the same problems, just in different forms. The outer details may change, but the inner experience stays the same. This happens because the loop doesn't care about what you want. It only follows what you repeatedly accept as normal. The moment you interrupt this pattern, even slightly, things don't just slowly improve, they begin to shift more deeply and noticeably. Not because of magic, but because of how your mind actually works. Your life isn't a straight path, it's more like a track, and your attention is what steers it. You may have felt this before, that strange moment in a conversation where everything suddenly feels familiar. The tone, the dynamic, even the outcome. It feels like you've already lived it. You might call it déjà vu, but what if it's actually your awareness catching the loop repeating itself? Most people never notice this loop because they're fully inside it, like a fish that doesn't realize it's in water. But sometimes you become aware. You wake up, reach for your phone automatically, open the same apps, and start looking for the same things: validation, messages, approval, or even problems. Within seconds, your mind locks on to a familiar emotional state, and that state shapes your entire day. Not because that's who you truly are, but because that's what your attention selected. The tricky part is that this loop doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like your personality. It speaks in your voice, saying things like, "I'm just being realistic," or "This is how life is," or "Nothing ever changes for me." But in reality, you're not discovering truth. You're repeating a script your mind has memorized, and life keeps reflecting it back because you're only looking for what matches that script. If we simplify it, your mind operates in two modes. The first is scanning to confirm the past. The second is scanning to experience the present. Most people live in the first mode. They don't wake up to experience a new day. They wake up to check if everything is still the same. And naturally, they find exactly what they're looking for. This isn't because life is unfair. It's because attention works like a filter. And a filter doesn't show you everything. It only shows you what it's designed to catch. If your focus is tuned toward disappointment, you'll notice disappointment everywhere. If it's tuned toward disrespect, even neutral situations will feel negative. And if it's tuned towards scarcity, even good moments will feel temporary or fragile. So when someone says, "My life never changes," what they really mean is, "I keep focusing on the same patterns. And until that focus changes, the results won't either." Breaking this loop isn't about forced positivity or repeating affirmations. It's not about pretending to feel confident when you don't. The real shift happens when you interrupt the automatic way your attention scans your world. Because that scan happens before your decisions, before your habits, and even before your motivation. It decides what your brain considers important, and your life is built around whatever your brain labels as important. If you want a different experience, don't start with big goals. Start with how your attention behaves in the first moments of your day. That's where everything begins. Every morning, your mind quickly checks what's wrong, what's missing, what needs fixing, and what might go wrong. This isn't a weakness, it's how the human brain evolved to survive. But in today's world, this constant scanning for problems can trap you in the same cycle because you can't step into something new while your mind is still focused on confirming the old. And here's the key shift. You don't break the loop by fighting it, you break it by noticing it. Not just your thoughts, but what your attention keeps returning to, what it keeps searching for, holding on to, and replaying. Because this loop feeds on familiarity, even when that familiarity is painful. That's why people sometimes return to unhealthy relationships. It's not always love. It's familiarity. That's why you hesitate right before progress. It's not laziness, it's your mind pulling you back to what feels known. And that's why certain memories keep repeating in your head, not for growth, but because the same signal keeps being replayed. Here's something simple you can do right now. As you read this, notice what your mind is trying to do. It may try to turn this into just another idea or concept, because once it becomes just information, you don't have to change anything. You can understand it and still stay the same. But instead of doing that, start observing your own patterns throughout your day. Notice where your attention goes automatically. Notice what it keeps returning to. That's where your loop lives. Because the real question isn't just how to change your life, it's how to stop feeding the pattern that keeps recreating the same life again and again. The real question isn't just what you focus on, but what your attention has become addicted to noticing, and what might change if you stopped feeding that habit. The observer loop doesn't restart when something bad happens, it restarts when something feels familiar. That's where most people get it wrong. They think the problem is in their life, circumstances, when in reality, it's the pattern of attention that keeps turning everything into the same repeated story. There are 3 hidden triggers that quietly restart this loop every single day, not once in a while, every day. And if you begin to notice them, you'll understand why some people change quickly while others stay stuck, even when they're constantly working on themselves. The first trigger is the morning scan. It begins even before you fully get out of bed. Your mind automatically starts searching, trying to figure out your situation. But situation usually means pressure. What problems are waiting? What messages didn't come? What is still unresolved? What's falling behind? Or what you wish wasn't true? This process feels normal, even responsible, but it's not. It's actually a form of selection. Because whatever you look for first becomes the reality you step into. Your attention is basically signaling, show me the same old version of my life. And naturally, that's what appears. This isn't because life is against you, it's because your nervous system is drawn toward what it already knows. So the first real discipline isn't about creating a long to-do list, it's about refusing to let your mind run this automatic scan unchecked. Not by ignoring reality, but by taking control of where your attention goes. A simple way to start is this. The moment you wake up, before touching your phone, say one clear sentence out loud. I'm not scanning today, I'm choosing. It may sound too simple, almost childish, but that's exactly why it works. This loop isn't logical, it's automatic, and automatic systems respond best to simple, repeated signals. After that, do something even more powerful. Take 10 slow breaths and gently rest your eyes on a single object in your room. It could be a wall, a chair, a door handle, or anything simple. Just observe it without attaching any story or meaning. Why does this matter? Because you're training your attention to stay in the present moment without immediately jumping into old patterns. This is where the loop begins to break. No story, no judgment, just awareness. Most people can't even stay with this for 10 breaths, and that alone shows how strong the loop really is. The second trigger is what you could call the confirmation moment. This one is even more dangerous because it feels like truth. At some point during your day, something small happens. A delayed reply, a slightly rude tone, a minor setback, or a plan that doesn't go perfectly. And instantly your mind grabs onto it and turns it into proof. Proof of your old story. Thoughts like, people don't respect me. Nothing ever works out. I always end up alone. Or, I'm always behind. That moment is where the loop feeds itself. Because the instant you treat a small event as evidence, your attention collapses back into the same pattern, pulling you onto the same track once again. Discipline here means something very simple but powerful. When friction appears in your life, you don't rush to interpret it. You pause. You delay giving it meaning. Instead of reacting instantly, you tell yourself one clear line: this is not evidence yet. That's all. You don't fight your thoughts, and you don't force yourself to be positive. You simply stop your mind from turning a small moment into a final judgment. Because once you turn moments into conclusions, those conclusions shape your identity, and your identity shapes your reality. This is how the loop traps you. All day long, it collects small pieces of evidence, and by the end of the day, it presents them as your personality. So now you need a new rule: no instant judgments. And when you feel yourself slipping into that familiar thought, here we go again, you interrupt it physically. Change your posture, relax your jaw, drop your shoulders, and take a slow breath out that's longer than your inhale. This works because your body controls the gate. The loop isn't only in your mind, it lives in your nervous system. Your body remembers the old pattern and tries to pull you back into it the moment something feels uncertain. So you teach your body something new. Uncertainty is not danger, it's possibility. And this shift doesn't happen in your thoughts, it begins in your breath. The third trigger is the night replay. This is where most people unknowingly undo their progress. At night, they replay the entire day like a courtroom. They revisit conversations, rethink what they should have said, and predict what might happen tomorrow. They call this processing, but in reality, it's rehearsal. You're rehearsing the same emotional pattern again and again, and whatever you rehearse at night becomes what your mind searches for the next morning. That's how the loop completes itself, a perfect cycle. Morning scan, daytime confirmation, night replay, and then back again. But if you break the night rehearsal, the entire cycle weakens. Here's a simple method. Before sleep, take just 3 minutes. No writing, no deep effort, just 3 minutes. First, name what's happening. I'm not replaying, I'm releasing. Then extract one lesson from your day in a single sentence. Not, "Today hurt me," or "Today proved something is wrong with me," but simply, "Today taught me." This turns experience into growth instead of identity. Finally, choose one new focus for tomorrow. One simple line. Tomorrow, I will notice. Maybe calm, maybe opportunities, maybe your triggers earlier. You're not trying to fix everything. You're just training your attention to look for something new. When you do this consistently, something interesting happens. You don't magically create a new life. You simply stop choosing the same old one. And when you stop choosing it, your reality begins to adjust because your environment has always been responding to what you treat as important. When people say their life changed instantly, what they really mean is that their relationship with life changed first, and then everything else followed. The real shift always starts inside. You stop reacting the same way. You stop feeding the same patterns. You stop rewarding the same situations with your attention. And suddenly, the world that was used to your predictability no longer knows how to respond to you. This is why, after breaking the loop, there's often a strange phase, a kind of turbulence. Old patterns come back stronger for a while, not because you're failing, but because the old version is trying to pull you back. A toxic message appears, a temptation shows up, or a small problem tries to drag you into old reactions. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They think it's proof that nothing has changed, but in reality, it's a test. Will you treat it as proof, or will you treat it as noise? Because noise is what a collapsing pattern sounds like. If you stay steady through it, you cross a threshold, and once you cross it, you understand something deeply. Your attention is not just something you use, it's something that directs your entire life. It's not a flashlight, it's a steering wheel. You're not here to get lucky. You're here to become unpredictable to your old patterns. Now comes the practical part, a simple, grounded system you can follow for 7 days. Not motivation, not theory, but a clear method. Because this loop doesn't break through inspiration, it breaks through repetition, through small actions done consistently until your mind stops treating the old pattern as home. This method has 4 parts: morning, midday, friction, and night. And the goal isn't to force a new life, it's to train a new way of observing. In the morning, don't scan, choose. For the first 10 minutes after waking up, avoid your phone, messages, or checking anything, because what you check first becomes what controls your attention. Instead, start with a command. I don't scan, I choose. Then, take 10 slow breaths while focusing on a single object without attaching any meaning to it. This trains your attention to stay steady instead of searching for problems. After that, ask yourself one question. What do I want to notice today? Then, choose one focus: calm, opportunity, discipline, clarity, or anything meaningful. You're not lying to yourself, you're training your filter. Within a couple of days, you'll feel a difference. Your mornings become quieter, not because life is perfect, but because you stopped letting your mind control your mood automatically. During the day, use a simple 30-second reset. At any point, pause, take a slow breath out, relax your body, and ask yourself, what am I feeding right now? Because whatever you give your attention to will grow. Then, choose something better to focus on. And finally, during moments of friction, practice the most important rule: delay meaning. Whenever something triggers you, don't interpret it immediately. Give yourself 90 seconds. Let the reaction pass before deciding what it means. Because in those small moments, your entire pattern either repeats or breaks. When a trigger hits, say one simple line in your mind. Loop attempt. Not I'm upset, not they're wrong, just loop attempt. This small shift creates distance between you and the reaction. Next, focus on your body first. Breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 seconds, then exhale for 6 seconds. Repeat this 3 times. This isn't random. It calms your system and stops the automatic reaction from taking over. Then ask yourself one neutral question. What else could this mean? Not to force positivity, but to stay open and free. Because the loop survives on one thing: instant meaning. And when you instantly assign meaning, it quickly turns into identity. And identity keeps recreating the same reality. This is where real change begins. Not when life suddenly becomes perfect, but when you stop reacting in predictable ways. The same tone that once controlled you no longer gets a reaction. Situations that used to overwhelm you no longer pull you in the same way. And slowly, reality begins to adjust because it's no longer getting the same response from you. Now comes the final piece, your night routine. Before sleep, you either fall back into replaying the old pattern, or you prepare your mind for a new direction. Keep it simple, just 3 minutes. First, close the day by saying, "Today is complete." Second, take one lesson from the day without adding emotion. Just one line. Today taught me. Third, prepare your attention for tomorrow. Choose one thing and say, "Tomorrow I will notice." That's it. You're not reliving your pain, you're shaping your focus. Because whatever you set at night becomes what your mind looks for in the morning. Now understand this clearly. If you follow this process, there will be a phase where it feels like everything is pushing back. Old habits feel stronger, old people may reappear, and old temptations might show up again. This is not failure. This is the old pattern losing its grip. The loop wants you to say, "See, nothing changes," so it can stay alive. But your only rule during this phase is simple. Don't treat this resistance as proof. Treat it like weather. You don't fight the weather, you adjust and keep moving. After this phase, something different starts to happen. You begin making choices that feel unfamiliar. You pause before reacting. You respond differently. You stop chasing what you used to chase. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop negotiating with your own discipline. And that's when your life begins to shift. Not because the world suddenly changed overnight, but because you stopped supporting the version of reality that kept you stuck. Here's the deeper truth. You are not your thoughts, not your emotions, and not your past. You are the one who notices them. And whatever you consistently choose to notice becomes your life. So the real shift is not, I will fix everything. It's, I am someone who no longer feeds the loop. That's identity. And identity shapes your direction. When you become that person, you don't rely on motivation or perfect timing. You simply follow the process, just like a daily habit. Because it becomes part of who you are, a new observer living on a new path. If you want to make this real, start now. Tonight, take 3 minutes and close your day properly, no excuses. And make one simple commitment to yourself. Select. Because the moment you choose consciously, you stop acting like a passenger in your own life. You become the one in control. And once you truly understand how to direct your attention, everything else begins to change.